Hi, everyone. Welcome to this edition of the ProjectPro AI Monetization Podcast. I'm Binny, the co-founder of ProjectPro. On this podcast, we speak with industry leaders who are working on AI use cases and seeing what kind of ROI and business outcomes they are seeing with AI inside enterprises. Today, we are honored to have with us none other than Nick Fuller. Nick is a vice president of AI and automation at IBM Research, where he leads a global team creating LLM and Agentic products that helps enterprises with multiple use cases and working on products growing at double digits at IBM scale. Nick has been at IBM for over 23 years, and previously he was the vice president of distributed cloud at IBM. And before joining IBM, Nick got his PhD in physics from Columbia. And he also found the time to write a book titled Struggle and Progress, which is basically a book about Nick's family tree going back multiple generations. Nick, thank you so much for taking time to do this. It's an honor to have you on the show.
Vinny, thanks so much for having me here. Really honored. Pleasure. Looking forward to it.
Thank you. Nick, we're all curious to basically to learn what role does your team kind of is mandated with inside IBM to help IBM both with research and application kind of products. That would be great to hear from you.
Awesome. So overall at Research, IBM Research, we have a twofold function. First function is to be the organic engine of growth for the IBM company. And that pretty much aligns quite well with the intro you provided, where my team specifically were responsible for creating and driving innovation in partnership with our product partners for IBM's platform software portfolio, which, as you pointed out, is doing quite well in the market, and we aim to continue that. So that's mission one, so to speak. And the second mission is, quote unquote, creating the future of computing. Can we create new markets? Can we go after various challenges in the computing space that begins to solve new problems and helps advance computing globally in the industry?
Got it. And within this mandate you just mentioned, Nick, and especially given that you lead AI research at IBM, there is just an exploding opportunity of the number of problems you can attack, right? How do you prioritize and pick what opportunities to go after, and how do you kind of map them to what can be mostly monetized very well?
Yeah, it's a fantastic question, right? And I can give you some specific examples, again, aligned with our mission. So, first and foremost, if you think about it, enterprises, of which IBM's an enterprise as well, they experience a myriad of problems. And as has been pointed out in many domains before,
Yeah,
their entry point in terms of how they may leverage AI can manifests itself in a few ways, but it's usually in some sort of code development way or some business process, customer care sort of way. And if you go back to pre-generative AI, that's certainly what we did, right? With various products in the customer care space, such as Watson X Assistant and so on and so forth.
yeah,
We continue to see, based on our clients, based on new clients, and based on our own internal problems, ways in which we can help enterprises mitigate those challenges in those domains which serve as entry points and ultimately progression to other domains. Domains in which customers care about application resiliency, security, compliance, and asset management, and so on, depending on the specific vertical. Now, that's one way in which problems come to us, and we look at what technologies, what algorithmic innovation, what other types of innovation might help us tackle those problems. The other way, though, is we as a research organization, yes, we're closely coupled with our product partners, but we very much are far-reaching as well. We have many partnerships with academia in the US, globally for that matter, and I can mention a few of those as well. And through those partnerships, we're advancing the state of the art and learning how to tackle new problems. Those new problems could very much end up being new markets for us. A good example of that would be in the domain of code modernization, a space that we have history in. But when one looks at code modernization and the IBM mainframe, of which 70% of global business transactions still take place, 70 plus percent, the notion of Gen AI brought closer to bear, hey, given that the developers who built the COBOL programs and other mainframe languages on which those applications run might have retired in one way or another, how do you lower the burden, so to speak, for the new age developer and for mainframe applications? So one of the things we started doing there several years back, and we commercialized towards the end of 2023, was in the space of modernizing COBOL to Java. And we launched product there, and with tight co-creation with various clients internally as well with our CIO organization, got that to a productization standpoint to which it's doing quite well in the market currently. So a new opportunity, a new market that opened up for a problem that existed, but people weren't necessarily thinking about right there and then. So there are many such examples. Time series is another example that I can get into, but this is typically how we function. Problems come to us through challenges that enterprises face today, and we certainly have our fair share of them being an enterprise. And then there are new markets that we open up based on the far-reaching work that we might be engaged in with academia or independently.
Makes sense. So, I mean, the code modernization, that strategy makes a lot of sense, which is it's kind of an area where IBM has traditional strengths in on the mainframe side. So I guess you have first access to the customer, their pain points. You're kind of deeply seen that for a while, and you build on top of that. The other thing that we were discussing earlier, Nick, was your focus on fit for purpose models. And I believe the time series use case you just mentioned now falls under that. Could you just help us understand a little more about what do you mean by fit for purpose?
Yeah, so clearly there are a couple of approaches that a tech provider might take here in terms of building models. You may build a model that is capable of doing almost everything under the sun, so to speak, right? And you pack a ton of training data in there, and you may do a range of post-training model optimization techniques, and of course you may do inference scaling as well. The approach we took was, hey, number one, open in terms of the availability of our models, our base models. So we took that approach. And then secondly, fit for purpose here really means for domain specificity, be it in text, in language, in code, in image, in time series, and so on. And we've been able to pack, if you look at our 8 billion parameter model, Granite 8 billion parameter model, which we initially released, and the most recent release of that went out fairly recently into the market, we train that on north of 12 trillion tokens or so with language, with various programming languages, north of 115 or so programming languages as well, image data, and we gradually grew context to 128K currently, which is currently available in the market. And subsequently, for the various domains, those are base models now in the open, we can build, as an example, with our code model that we use for both mainframe optimization, mainframe translation, for Java modernization. We can apply a range of fine-tuning techniques to get those to our proprietary models used in our respective Watson X Code Assistant products. Again, partnering internally with our CIO organization, partnering with external clients, and getting to acceptance metrics, so to speak, for each of those customers. Now, in the time series domain, we took a similar approach. And a challenging domain in the sense that, there's a multivariate nature, multi-channel nature to time series data, and it's very different from language and code in that context. We embarked on the process. We got a lot of learning as well. We started with a transformer approach, partnered with a variety of clients through IBM Consulting, built very client-specific models initially as well, and embarked on the process of taking what's in the open, a range of data sets, building a pre-trained univariate model that can be subsequently fine-tuned for multivariate forecasting. Very small. We use an alternative architecture here based on a multi-layer perceptron. So we call these tiny time mixer models because the sizes are in the order of 1 to 5 million, tiniest you'll find in the market. And best in performance are based on the GIF leaderboard for point forecasting in this domain. and to date doing quite well on Hugging Face. I was just looking prior to our session beginning here, and it's just shy of 13 million downloads since being put into the open uh, just under a year ago or so.
Mhm. That's very impressive. And are most of the use cases of the time series foundation models in financial services, or is that where you're seeing most of it?
Actually, financial, yes. They certainly come up. Transaction processing, right? There's a client that has given us a public testimonial. They do stock prediction known as Quantum Street AI, and they've seen some improvements over their conventional techniques with the model that they've been employing that they now run in production. So that's certainly one use case, right? A range of financial use cases, be it financial transactions and stock prediction and so on and so forth. Manufacturing is another huge one, right? Anything that has a timestamp. So you have a variety of sensor data, be it temperature measurements, humidity measurements, energy measurements, and so on. And we have companies in the paper sector, in the cement sector, with partnerships with our consulting business, leveraging the model at proof of concept stage and ultimately aiming to get to production to improve their processes, to do process optimization, anomaly detection, classification, all of these are possible. But by and large, we see a variety of sectors, be it financial, be it manufacturing, energy and utilities is another good example that find use for this in the broader industrial enterprise setting.
Got it. Got it. Just switching gears a little bit, Nick. You were also at the forefront of when the cloud revolution was taking off a little over a decade back. You've seen how that whole shaped up. You're kind of leading the efforts right now with AI. Does this time feel very different from when the cloud revolution was taking off? Yes, no. If so, why?
Yeah. So it feels similar in some ways, right? And I'll explain the similarity.
Yeah.
So with cloud, the mindset was, hey, we can quickly, you know, take our data off wherever it runs, assuming all the boxes are checked from a security, compliance, resiliency point of view for our mission critical applications and reduce costs, right? Transfer the burden of ownership from our infrastructure maintenance, full stack maintenance, et cetera, to that of a provider. And we're responsible for the application. That didn't pan out, obviously. And hybrid has become the new norm. What is similar here is from a model point of view, right? And I think we're already seeing some inflections here based on how things are evolving in the era of generative AI and agentic AI. The notion seemed to be, hey, we all will need significant amounts of compute, accelerator compute to build these models, and models would need to be bigger and better. We've been, as I mentioned before, maintaining a particular status quo as it relates to fit for purpose models, with models on the much smaller side, certainly in text and language and code and so on the order of 8 or so billion. We'll go bigger than that, but similarly in time series on the order of only a few to million up to 5 million or so. And then we saw not too long ago, a few weeks ago, the announcement from DeepSeek, open model, also much smaller compared to what is out there, doing just as well on reasoning benchmarks and other benchmarks and so on, academically. And so this is an inflection point from our point of view. It has democratized and legitimized in some ways the whole notion of open, and the similarity I find with cloud, whereas many people were thinking, and this took a longer time to play itself out in the market, that we will not be quote unquote single hyperscaler focus, but would be multi hyperscaler focus, would be hybrid focus, etc. I think we're seeing a similar thing here from a model standpoint, right? Multi-model focused view, and a view that doesn't necessarily align with always needing to have a ton of compute to build the biggest and best model out there. So a democratization is occurring, so to speak, from a model perspective. And by the way, just to add to that, when we launched our platform, right, our data and AI platform, watsonx.ai, we had that initial view. And so we launched a multi-model view, right? So on watsonx.ai, one can access a range of models from Meta and models from a range of other sources and so on, and our own models, right? And that's the traffic we typically see. It's a blend of consumption models that we see people employing our platform for.
Okay. And we have heard before in this podcast about enterprise leaders being concerned about security of their data when it comes to AI models, right? Uh, this is despite the foundation model companies kind of putting in clauses that data will not be used to uptrain the models and stuff like that. So how much of these fears are valid and how much of it is unfounded? How should enterprise leaders think about their privacy of data when it comes to AI models?
So this is a critical point, and interestingly, invariably, the conversations we are a part of because we've provided a lot of visibility into the provenance of our data, the sources, the data preparation techniques, pre-processing techniques, what we've done from a filtering standpoint in terms of hate, profanity, abuse, and so on. Uh, it resonates with customers. There are examples, of course. They are fewer and far between of clients finding a challenge when that sort of disclosure hasn't taken place. But I think more time is needed in the market. The thing that resonates with me when I think about this, it's a mistake that no one wants to have a data point for as an enterprise. So you typically go to the conservative side and say, well, yes, this is what I think I will need, and you employ that. And for that reason, we built Guardian models as well, right, which can help you both on the input and the output. And part of our most recent 3.2, Granite 3.2 release. And again, customers are approaching us for that reason because they see the value in that approach, both the additional sort of belt and suspenders methodology, if you will, with the Guardian models, together with what you did up front in terms of complete visibility with the training data set and the processes you've taken it through from a training point of view, post-training optimization, and so on. So I think as time goes on, depending on enterprises who are a lot more bullish, maybe it's a it's a reflection of both of industry and the specific company and their focus, their use cases, etc. But I think we will see invariably some more of that, and we err on the side clearly for conservatism, giving you the protection that you need so that you have a base model that you can trust and use for your range of use cases.
Could you speak a little more about the Guardian models and what does it enable?
So Guardian models, right, which we released a few weeks back with our 3.2 release, which also included an update on the image side, right? These are models that are in a similar size, right? Similar range. There are other types of models out there in the market, right? But it's a smaller market, as you might imagine. And the purpose of these are to help you on the input and on the output. So when you look at our Guardian models, the rough size is 5 billion or so. There's an 8 billion counterpart. There's an MOE version of that as well. And then we have done a variety of benchmarks on harm detection, RAG hallucination, function calling hallucination. Those benchmarks are quite competitive, right? And available in the paper that we're publishing for this as well.
Okay.
And we see, in terms of customers and their use cases, right? If you have something that's helping you both on the input,
Yeah.
right, as well as on the output from a Guardian point of view, clearly that gives you an additional belt and suspenders, if I may say it that way, protection, in addition to what you already know that's going into building your base model, assuming you have that. Again, you may take the approach of you're taking something that's much more competitive, that is more closed, so to speak, with less visibility to the provenance applied to that data, and you might want to apply the Guardian models on top of that. So that's totally a customer's choice, but those are the basics of it.
Got it. Makes sense. Yeah. And Nick, just switching back to the use cases, you spent a fair amount of time focusing on IT kind of operations, IT lifecycle management with AI. Could you help us understand a little more about what is the problem that's being solved there and what role does AI play there to solve those problems?
Yeah, fantastic. So IT is almost as old, if I may say it that way, in terms of the application of AI to help sysadmins initially and subsequently site reliability engineers. I do think most customers still enter through the lens of customer care, business process, right? Low-hanging fruit for productivity, code development, a code assistant, code modernization, etc. But application resiliency, you only had to live through the CrowdStrike event. And of course, there have been many others to know how critical it is for application resiliency. IT is the thing you only think about when you suffer the issue that's in front of you, unfortunately, right? So it's one of those things. And it begins really with you think of IT systems, and even if something is running purely on a cloud environment, many of these are, of course, hybrid, and you have full instrumentation. One of the things that sysadmins will tell you, site reliability engineers will tell you, the alerts that they get can actually cause a significant amount of fatigue, right? So one of the first things they need help with, assuming something is beginning to show like a latency issue or what have you, is how to address alert fatigue, right? So triaging and filtering out pieces that are only relevant for them. So that's sort of step one, right? Uh, but now that you might have an issue that's manifesting, right? You quickly go to the next step. Okay, so I have the relevant events in front of me, but can I go to the next step and further assess, well, if I do have an issue, I've done that identification, what is causing this issue? What's the probable root cause of this issue, right? And many companies, ourselves included, with our application performance monitoring tool at Stana, have gone after this from the beginning of time, if I may almost say it that way, with quote unquote traditional machine learning, deep learning, subsequently followed up by the era we're in now. It's one of the hardest problems, particularly if you're running on a infrastructure that's not fully instrumented, right? So, say you're running on some on-premise type system, running on cloud. Even then, it can be very difficult for a number of reasons. So that's where you apply it next, right? Can I assess probable cause? But even after having probable cause, Benny, you still have to go through the process, right? Of okay, now I've assessed probable cause. Maybe what do I do next?
Right.
In terms of remediating that issue,
Yeah.
both descriptively and then from a code point of view, right? What scripts do I need to execute to return the system to steady state? What I just described, that entire life cycle, that incident management life cycle, that workflow can be not fixed, by the way, very dynamic, progressing from one step to another. And so if you look at the progression of AI, it actually helps you in that regard because we've applied, for example, uh, causal AI, right? Machine learning, deep learning technologies published in ACM last year that improves probable cause for Instana. And we see the growth in that in the market, right? Clients, it's resonating with clients. And I can give you some examples of that. And now we're going to the next step. Because you might have a dynamic nature to the workflow, et cetera, agentic AI is likely to help us as well.
Got it. It's very interesting you mentioned this use case, Nick, because I remember my first job ever. I was an intern at Credit Suisse in their IT team. And my first job as an intern was every day morning I would get a list of outages. And I had to call everybody who had to do the outage and ask them why did it happen, what is the root cause, and they would just hate talking to me about their outages. Uh, and I had to classify them as red, yellow, green, stuff like that, and all of that stuff. Yeah, this is very interesting.
Yeah, my wife's in pain management, and I always ask her, how do you address this? Because when someone's coming to see you, they're not happy. So it's no different from you reaching out to these owners, right? These LOB owners, to assess probable cause. But here the tool, right? Assuming it works well, assuming you met acceptance criteria and you've gained the trust of the end user, right? The sysadmin, site reliability engineer becomes a very compelling partner for that persona to help mitigate the issue.
Yeah, makes sense. And Nick, to make progress on use cases such as these, which are complex, competitive, contributing to double-digit growth, what is your playbook to hire, onboard, and retain top talent?
Yeah, it's a fantastic question, right? So there's no shortage of competition, right, for top talent across the planet. We have a couple of sort of levers that we leverage here, right? As I mentioned before, we have very close partnerships with a range of academic institutions. So UIUC comes to mind, CMU comes to mind, Stanford comes to mind, right? In India, the IITs come to mind, Technion, and so on, out in Europe, etc. So we have a range of strong partnerships with a number of universities. Many of those students apply for internships at IBM and other schools as well, but many of those students. And the internship is a long interview process if you think about it, right? 12-week process, both for us interviewing the intern and the intern interviewing us. And so if you go back several years ago, we actually weren't doing that good of a job of taking advantage of that long interview process. Many of those interns didn't actually join IBM. We didn't have a sort of deliberate focus on intern conversion. Now we do, right? And not recently, but going back a few years well at this point. And so that has really worked well for us. Putting that lever aside, there's always the possibility of discovering top talent who may have interned elsewhere for that matter, for one reason or another, may not have interned at IBM Research, and happens to be in an area of critical need for us, and we go after such an individual. And then last but not least, professional hires. They're fewer and far between, but they're also a critical path that we explore in terms of having a team that's highly focused on top talent to drive the impact that we need to drive.
Got it. Got it. Makes sense. And given that you are at the frontier of what's happening with AI today, what kind of stuff are you most excited about that you're seeing out there in the forefront?
Yeah, this application stuff I mean, models are very interesting. I love the application of them and how we're able to build a range of Gen AI patterns, agentic applications to solve these problems. We went through a few of them already. We touched on IT, right, and incident management. We touched on code modernization for mainframe languages for Java. They're all very exciting to me. What I also like that's coming out of this is the ability to benchmark. I think there's a range of academic benchmarks, of course, when we put our models out there. I mentioned with the Guardian models a second ago as well. We benchmark them academically for sure. The industrial setting brings a new set of benchmarks. And if you look at it, it's something that we've had to do. We did this extensively in mainframe modernization as an example, starting with human eval pack for our code models. But then as we fine-tuned that and created our COBOL specific model that runs in production today, created a set of enterprise benchmarks. And we do this in conjunction with SMEs. We do this in conjunction with the clients who we're co-testing and co-creating these capabilities. It gives us a really definitive way of evaluating how well not only is a given model performing, but the feature that model is being used for, be it code translation, be it incident management, probable root cause in the incident space, and so on, how well it's performing in a client context. That begins to matter, right? So we've actually spent a whole lot more time, and you asked about excitement, right? This whole universe of the application space, when I think of the problems we're solving that matter to enterprises, number one, but then number two, we can actually, in an impartial way, whether it's a benchmark we've created or it's a benchmark provided externally, provide a complete impartial way to do a comparison with our capabilities compared to those of others. So and of course, teams are excited to see their stuff on leaderboards, right? I mentioned time series being top 1 point forecasting. That's a moment of excitement for that team and so on. And that's a constant race too. I mean, and that's not our only focus, clearly, because it's about driving impact. But when I bring the totality of that together, the impact we're driving on the IBM product side, go to market, and the innovation that teams are creating where they see their stuff resonating at the top 1, 2, what have you, positions and leaderboards, it creates for a fantastic, vibrant culture and environment.
Yeah. And this benchmark is the ITBench that you're referring to, that
It's one of them. It's one of them. So yeah, and so to backtrack a little bit on ITBench, right? So what we did in many of these cases, we've created enterprise benchmarks because the offerings just need that beyond the academic benchmark to show competitiveness and true use and value for the end consumer. Yeah. But what we did in the IT space, right? We discovered, unlike many other spaces where you have enterprise benchmarks, you actually didn't have this at all here. And so we went about the process of creating scenarios for incident management, for compliance management, for financial operations management, brought those together, about 100 or so enterprise scenarios, and created the benchmarks for that and put them out into the open, right? What we call ITBench.
yeah.
And interestingly, we've been leveraging it already to both get a sense of how well it performs for what's already in our Instana product, for probable root cause. We released a series of base agents, right? Non-proprietary agents in there. So we released an agent for incident management, known as an SRE agent, one for compliance management, known as a CISO agent, and so on and so forth. And it really allows us to go in there and look at what's already in product and benchmark it, right, in an impartial way. Back to the point about talent, we did this in collaboration with UIUC. So you see how this begins to, touch all the respective points, be it building talent, be it benchmarking in an open way to compare the performance of agents, of models, of what's already in product, and so on and so forth.
Makes sense. And for those of us who program these models or prompt these models to build applications, what guidance do you have for us on the psychology of these models so that we can kind of use that to write better prompts, better workflows around these foundation models?
Yeah, it's a fantastic question. We internally obviously have the benefit of being co-located, right, with the model building team, right? Colleague of mine who is focused on that, as part of his overall remit. And that co-location helps a ton. So step one really is close collaboration, right? Close collaboration is really essential in terms of getting into the psychology of those models if feasible. Again, that may not be practical for other teams. The other thing is there's tools we've built that are exploring that. Like we built, or we're in the process of building a conversational prompt engineering system to help navigate that experience that one might have with one or more models in building and prompting such models for a variety of tasks. We're also trying to extend what we do from a Granite point of view and reducing the burden on the prompt side. They're all different. There's an experiment we ran fairly recently with a closed model, and that closed model showed I would say about 1.5x better performance than our latest Granite model in the IT space. We optimized the prompt on the Granite side, and they then became neck and neck. It's as interesting as that, right? The sensitivity one can find, and it's an art, of course. It's not a science. So getting better into the psychology of the model, there's no shortcut. That's one thing. Then secondly, though, building a better understanding both of the use case you're trying to apply it for and understanding the model psychology and bringing them closer together. There's really no shortcut. Now, a variety of tools can help, and we're on that path as well, as I'm sure many others are.
Okay. And do you get a sense that it is relatively not easy, but relatively straightforward to get to a 60% or a 70% solution to a problem with AI, and the last 30% is always kind of black magic kind of area? And what tips do you have for us to go from 70% complete to 95% complete solution?
Yeah, by and large, I think what you're saying is true, right? It's almost the equivalent of doing a proof of concept and subsequently getting something to scale. Or you're sort of approaching it from an intermediate point. So again, I agree with you in terms of getting to 70. That's 70 plus or 60 plus, right? If I may phrase it a little bit more practically for many of us. I think it's three things, one of which I mentioned already. It's transitioning from academic benchmarks to enterprise benchmarks. Without that, we would not have been where we are with a range of our products. I mentioned the code assistant portfolio for Java mainframe optimization, modernization. Excuse me. I mentioned what we're doing with incident management and Instana, what we're doing with Maximo and asset lifecycle management. In each of those cases, we've progressed from academic benchmarks in terms of base model performance to maybe it's some fine-tuned model, certainly in the case of code modernization, that we subsequently developed enterprise benchmarks so that we got a closer sense of what was needed in terms of the capabilities that we were building. Yeah. So that's one, enterprise benchmarks. The second piece is, and that manifests itself in another way too, but that will get me to the third piece. The second piece is invariably, these are tools. And if these tools aren't trusted, for one reason or another, even if it meets some acceptance criteria by end users, it falls on its face, right? And so getting user acceptance testing at scale is a critical thing. One of the things that has really helped us there is our internal use. So we've done this I mentioned the CIO team a number of times, whether it be on code modernization, whether it be on what we do for IT systems and incident management. We've also leveraged our software support team, right? IBM's experiences receives does on the order of 1 million cases a year, right? It's a pretty large team for several hundred products. And so we've leveraged that team for RAG pattern evaluations and so on. And then on the physical side, we have 150 sites, the IBM company, right?
Wow.
We use Maximo to manage work orders, right? And some of those work orders are complicated, right? And so there was a need to address how well you can remove the time sink of the complicated work orders that was sinking the time of the plant operators. And we did that through generative AI and synthetic data generation to improve the amount of data, given that you don't see a ton of data in these types of use cases. User acceptance testing became absolutely critical there. In each of these spaces, you have hundreds to thousands to tens of thousands of users. That helped us a ton internally and certainly with clients to get to scale. So UAT is essential. Without it, there's no trust, right? And obviously, it's not adopted.
Yeah.
The third piece, which only begins once you've tackled the sort of you know, fat part of the Gaussian is that long tail, right? Corner cases, right? Which invariably come up
Yeah.
and can be a difference maker, quite frankly, for some organizations. And you may major in precision, you may major in recall, depending on what that circumstances, that use cases. But those three brought together, we view as essential. And that's how we've been seeing progress. Listen, while we might be in this agentic space and that's attracting a lot of attention, and we certainly are pushing the boundaries there from an innovation standpoint, adoption is a trailing indicator, right? And so many people, many clients are still in that adoption phase for vanilla Gen AI infusion, if I may describe it that way. And each of those three pieces, and perhaps others, will matter for that adoption to grow.
Got it. Got it. And finally, Nick, you've had a fantastic career over the last couple of decades, from joining IBM as a researcher to being vice president of like the hottest technology out there right now. What are some tips do you have for somebody who's just getting out of college, wanting to go into research? How should they think about their next 2 decades?
Yeah, fantastic question. And as you noted in my intro, right, my PhD is in physics. And so in 2002, if, some angel visited me at night and said in 23 years, this is what you'd be doing, I'd say, what is that? So step one really is about having, an open mind, being almost like a sponge every day as you grow, and nurturing that with a ton of passion, right? So your passions will drive you, and I keep those very core to me. So my advice to the, new university hire, excuse me, someone graduating out of university, either with a bachelor's, master's, or PhD degree, continue to feed your passions and work on them, execute them with a fervent work ethic. But as you do that,
Yeah.
cultivate a very broad mindset. In cultivating a broad mindset, it will keep your mind open to new things that come up because technology isn't stagnant. That we know for sure. And the next opportunity for you could be very different from the one that you initially trained for. Certainly was the case for myself. And you could miss out on a potentially great opportunity that allows you to continuously feed your passion if that isn't present. So it's a combination of the two in many ways. Passion, discover your passions, nurture your passions, execute on your passions, and secondly, cultivate a growth mindset, being open to any possibility as the world evolves and continues to evolve, and be that difference maker. You can be the creator of something great, something in the future, relevant for all of us.
Awesome. Now, one follow-up question on that, which is, you mentioned focus on your passions, but at the same time, keep an open mindset about opportunities, right? How do you make the trade-off between doing that consistent, mundane work on a daily basis versus being distracted by the shiny object when you keep an open mind? How do you maintain that?
Yeah, they seem at odds with each other, don't they?
Ah,
Those two perspectives. So I think they're at odds for sure if one tries to do this at the granularity on a temporal scale of a day or a week or a month, right? Clearly, the investment and time required to reach some sort of plateau in any of these will take time. When I first switched, as an example, from building next generation microprocessors within IBM and innovation that led to that, I went into a data science space, right? Driving innovation for what is now Kyndryl, formerly IBM Global Technology Services. And what drew me to that was data, the growth in data that was happening, right? Going to so-called big data. And that ultimately led to distributed systems and so on. But for each of those phases, right, I spent the better part of a few years right? Sinking my teeth into things, partnering well with people. There is a bit of an imposter syndrome that can manifest itself, I think, for anyone when you do these things. Even when you're the expert, by the way. I was a clear expert in what I used to do when I got my PhD, and then I would go into these conferences and pitch, and there would be questions coming from multiple directions, not from an attacking point of view, but because we're trying to synthesize and improve the knowledge in a given space. The same is true when you transition. I think people should approach it that way, right? If you're trying to be the smartest in the room, that I've found not to necessarily be the best way to go about things, but there's value you bring. Once the PhD teaches you how to learn and learn any new area. And I found that to be the way to approach it. But the time scale is definitely a bit longer. It's on the order of, I would say, years years doesn't mean several years. It can be a few years. So I think within that time period, they sort of coexist really well.
Got it. Makes sense. That's very helpful. And finally, Nick, what kind of motivated you to invest time and write the book, Struggle and Progress? How did that come about?
Yeah, so multiple things took place at sort of the same time. The first thing was I really wanted to. I grew up in a single parent home, and it's something that's in the book, and it's nothing that I keep to myself. I'm very proud of it in terms of what my mother was able to achieve. The struggles that I faced as a young person in the absence of my father, I was able to navigate those struggles, and I really wanted to tell her story, right, in terms of what she was able to do as a single parent raising two successful children and herself being successful. But then the other piece started to weigh into that, right? The book took me, I think I say it in the introduction, it took me the better part of 10 years, right? Which is interesting, a 10-year endeavor as you think about timescales, back to your prior question. But what motivated me during each stage of those 10 years as I watched my children grow and I, of course, raised them with my wife and so on and continue to do, what was really dawning on me was a need to ground them, right? And it served a secondary effect, if you will, right? Just to be a little bit geeky about it. So you had a primary dependency, and then you had this secondary dependency on grounding them in terms of their dad's history, and putting that into words, right? Something that they can read, grasp at the right stage of their life, and understand their journey because they were growing up in a more privileged environment, very different from the environment, humble environment in which I grew. So the combination of the two, and then I would say after the 60-70%, back to your analogy, right? That final 30% was really pure grit because you're at a point now where, okay, I have the essence of it, but it's not done, right? It's not consumable, not for the enterprise, but for the average reader. And so I wanted to push through with, at the end, it was just pure grit to get it done, so to speak, which I think it's 2025 now. I think that was about 4 years or so ago. So I'm actually more than that, 8 or so years. So I'm very proud of it. It's actually done pretty well. There's a number of schools from my home country that have invested in it, and it's in their libraries, etc. And it's at the point where random people reach out to me on it, which is, it's a joy for me. And it's something that I look back on very fondly in terms of the endeavor and the culmination of it and the purpose it's meant to serve.
Yeah, that's amazing. Very, very inspiring. Uh,
Thank you.
Nick, this has been a fantastic conversation. Thanks for taking time to do this.
Binny, thank you. My pleasure. Pleasure being here with you.